I mean, we saw what happened when there was more interconnectivity with communications over the internet. What the internet did for communications, I think Bitcoin and Lightning can do for monetary financial services. So
today is Saturday, March 25th. It's 1:44 p.m. Griff and I are just sitting here having this conversation about, man, what it's like to be a Bitcoiner. It's interesting to see all this stuff that has happened with the banking industry through COVID. For me, it's almost like, man, I spend 3 or 4 or 5 days in it straight where I'm just in Twitter, reading different things, interacting with different people, entertaining new thoughts, reading new information that's coming out. And dude, I mean, I don't know how many conversations I've had over the past, week or so with people that are coming up and asking me questions, people that I've continued to having conversations with. I agree with what you were saying earlier, where it's like Bitcoin is almost like, it's almost not made for you to like make it your entire life. The properties that make Bitcoin also enable us to focus on what really matters in life and call that, the relationships you've got with friends and family, your career and your purpose in the world, your physical health, your spiritual health. I feel like when we have a solid financial foundation and then we build good personal financial planning on top of that, man, I mean, that really enables us to not think at all about money anymore and to go do the things that we truly care about. What do you think, Griff?
Yeah, you know where it's got me, bro? Like, I just thought about this because I was just telling Nick basically about how I'm fucking tired. I'm tired of there just not being in 2020 is when around I got in Bitcoin. Just this spark of something I want to learn about because it's changing a lot, not just about what I'm doing, but it's changing who I am. Because honestly, if you ever learn about anything important or you're passionate about anything, it will affect who you literally are as a person. I recognize there are almost two root paradigms to life, and it's those that are proof of work and live proof of work, and it's those that are proof of stake, that are a little bit dependent on a system, and their job was probably created by a system that is easy. At the end of the day, what I'm describing is a life that is entirely independent of a state, of a body, of other people. To be dependent on the economy, for food and things like that, I think is okay. Even then, sometimes I'm like, should I be farming all my own stuff and learning to should I just be basically like facilitating a compound? And to be honest, that's a fair question. Should we all just be prepping for doomsday and what life is going to be like outside of a government? But the realities are coming, Nick. Whether it's the AI or whether it's our own government blows up the money, needing the ability to be more self-reliant, to live, like, and I'm talking hunter-gatherer live, I think is going to be way more important than the last 50 years. So I don't know. So this is what me and Nick are discussing, because we get on here and we do this podcast every Saturday, and we like our Twitter account because it's fun. Me and Nick are also business guys. Me and Nick also didn't start this podcast to get famous. We started it to try to get other people into Bitcoin, or if somebody was curious, here's what we learned. But we for sure didn't get on thing to be like, oh yeah, like we want to make sure that we're getting views and clicks and all this stuff. We like when we see the message spreading, and we do like talk. We do, and I will say this: I have like kind of cheating other Bitcoiners in the sense that I think there are cool people we've had on here that other people haven't to talk to, and we got to talk to them because we have a podcast. So that's been a huge win. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of what we're discussing, Nick. We're just like all up in the air about everything that's going on, because me and Nick are going to be millionaires one day, whether that's just in Satoshis or relative to the rest of everybody else. We want to build business. We want to get out there. We want to get our hands dirty. We want to affect the community. We want to employ people. We want to employ lots of people. We want to actually be sitting around all day going, our business is so good. How do we just make it even better to work here? How do we just continue to build better things? And all we're waiting on is that idea or that spark or that passion. How hard should I be searching for it versus do you just let something like that come to you? Or you just continue to build processes in your life that are important, like working out every day or reading more? Do you just do the right things, and then because you do the right things, the idea comes, then the business comes? Because I think the more you do the right thing or the good thing, then more good things come or more bigger opportunities come. And I don't know. I mean, it's a mixture of probably everything. our podcast shouldn't be, this should be the most on fire the Nick and Griff show's ever been on Bitcoin news. I'm telling you guys, whoever listens, yeah, shit is on fire. Banks are on fire. Countries are on fire. There are secret meetings going on. Banks are offering $1,000 to start a savings account with 4% interest. Things aren't good. Red alert. And I couldn't feel better about it because I've been buying Bitcoin. And yeah, hey man, I get the dollar price thing. If it goes up, cool. I'm going to look way cooler to everybody else. But I'm really buying that shit because if this whole thing fucking blows up, I got the only money that works. Like literally. And I actually understand money now. Bitcoin's taught me about, oh, this is why they use seashells. This is that. And I'm an economics student. And I learned way more about the foundation, like what is money, like so to speak. And it's fun because Nick is going to, this is why I like the podcast. We have a report from the president.
You mentioned this economic report of the president, and that is exactly what I want to look at today to share, I guess, maybe a little bit of the current news, some thought processes that may be out there. So for those of you guys that do not know, this is an annual report. It's broken out into several main categories. You know, I think it's interesting that they continue to talk about how digital assets and cryptocurrencies maybe aren't as stable as, or aren't as powerful as, or aren't the answer to, really anything that has been caused by the Federal Reserve, by the federal government. So it's kind of interesting to see what their takes are on these things. And I think it's interesting to look at this to understand what their narrative is. So I'm just going to pop over here. There's one main piece that I want to look at, and it is in the 8th chapter that is all about digital assets. And they've got a side note in here that is all about what are the functions of money. That's what this section is titled here. So I just want to read this for you guys. And I've got a couple of pieces here that are highlighted. So I just want to read this to you guys. Let's jump into it. In early history, bartering was a common way for people to exchange goods and services. Bartering, however, takes time because individuals need to find another person who is willing to trade one physical good or service for another. A workaround for this was the invention of money. Some of the earliest forms of money appeared in about 1200 BCE. Money's key innovation was to facilitate trade between individuals by using an item that had a common representation of value that was widely agreed upon by members of society. This is, instead of having to take a goat everywhere and hoping to find someone who wanted the goat, money enabled individuals to carry something that everyone valued, such as polished beads, which could be exchanged for a wide variety of goods and services. Griff, I think for the most part, I agree with this. Yeah, bartering was great. You run into the double consequences of want, where, what they said there is, now I've got to try to find somebody to buy my goat. When instead, enter money, you could use the most saleable good, the most liquid good to trade goods and services. So I agree with that part. Let's keep moving. The first money was in the form of things like seashells, beaver pelts, and even large stones. Eventually, money took the form of, I don't know how to pronounce this word, specie. It says, or coins such as gold and silver, which could be produced to a specific standard or weight. While money like coin money, metal money, was decidedly more convenient than carrying around a goat, it was still cumbersome to transport. To get around this, paper money was created, which was substantially easier to transport. To ensure that paper money still had financial value, it was backed by real coin and metal money. That is, the paper money essentially served as a promissory note for coin money sitting in a bank, and it could be freely redeemed. Now, here's where it gets interesting, Griff. I want to see if you can recognize maybe a ginormous piece that's missing in this story. This system worked well, but it had a key vulnerability that became a common theme of many crises. Banks could earn higher profits by issuing more paper currency than the amount of coin currency they held in their vault. Okay, I do actually agree with that piece. For example, a bank could hold 50 gold coins, but could issue 100 units of paper currency. each giving the holder the right to one gold coin. Then, if all holders of the currency demanded their money back at the same time, the bank would not have enough gold coins to meet the holders' redemptions. Sound familiar? Sound like the current banking crisis? That's exactly what has happened. This dynamic, referred to as a bank run, also has a long history, dating back to as early as the 4th century BCE. Okay, so let's pause here before it moves to the next paragraph. Yes, this is absolutely true, right? We realized that let's just say gold was the hardest form of money that we'd found up to this point, and we said, hey, let's use this. But gold has a similar problem to Bitcoin in the scalability aspect. It's difficult to move gold around. Now, Bitcoin you can move around, but gold was difficult to move around. It's difficult to verify. And if you want to use it on a global basis, man, you can't use it with the internet, right? But the early answer for the scalability of gold was, hey, let's use paper money that represents some standard amounts of gold, and we'll keep the gold in the banks, and we'll use this paper money to transact day to day. And that works for a while until trust breaks down and the banks begin, like what they say here, printing more paper money than there is actual specie, whatever that word is, however it's pronounced, the real coin money, the real metals. So let's move on here. They skip a huge piece. It says, eventually, institutions and faith in currencies, particularly the US dollar, became strong enough. Coin money was not needed to assuage investors' concerns about what was backing the currency. Okay, so this is true partially, but for the majority, it's lacking a huge piece. So it says, eventually institutions and faith in currencies, particularly the dollar, became strong enough that coins were not needed to assuage the investors' concerns about what was backing the currency. This is not what actually happened in history. What actually happened was in the Bretton Woods Agreement, this is right after World War II, all the large economies and major economies in the world, they all get together and everybody decides that the United States dollar is going to get backed to gold, is going to get tied to gold at $35 per ounce of gold. That's a standard measurement that the dollar and gold made. And then everybody else pegged their currencies to the dollar. Ergo, everything is connected to gold, right? The dollar is connected to gold. Everything's connected to the dollar. Well, then in 1971, as people started to realize, man, maybe the United States doesn't have all the gold that they say that they do. I'm going to call their bluff and I'm going to go get my money. I want to say, Griff, it was France maybe that even got in their ships and started heading to the United States. And then Nixon comes out famously in 1971 and says, we are going to temporarily suspend the dollar's convertibility to gold. And that is actually what creates the fiat money that becomes the US dollar. Now listen to what they say next. This led to the creation and adoption of fiat currency. Now, I think creation is maybe correct. Adoption was kind of forced, right? Because everybody was already using the dollar when it was made fiat. But it says this led to the creation and adoption of fiat currency, or currency issued by the government that is not redeemable for, some type of physical metal coin or money. Fiat currency's value is largely a function of, one, the currency being the only instrument with which individuals can pay taxes. I think that's pretty dirty, but true. Two, the strength of the government's institutions, such as the legal system and the military. Okay, I guess maybe you could say that in some way, shape, or form. And three, a shared social trust in the value of the money itself. I can agree with that. Now, I think the big piece here that's missing that they actually don't call out at all is that fiat money wasn't just created and the government said, hey, let's do this. And everybody said, hey, that's a great idea. Let's do that. That's not the way that it happened, which is how they're kind of saying or implying that it happened here. What actually happened was gold was the real money. Everybody decided that 1 ounce of gold was going to be worth $35. And then everybody said, well, I'm going to peg my currency to the dollar because it's pegged to gold. And then that connection was severed. And now we're all living in a world where we're forced to use fiat currency. So again, I think it's an important piece to note. The language that they use, what is the narrative that they are spinning, and are they spinning it in their own favor? I would argue that they maybe are.
They're spinning it in their own favor, Nick, because the whole thing, they just went from seashells bartering to seashells to gold backed by fiat to fiat. And they omitted pretty much every example and reason why everything happened and how all of it happened. So the entire article is just a bunch of shit, and they're lying. Now, yeah, you can argue the dollar still had enough faith to work, right? But they literally had to go and peg it to something else. They had to go make an agreement with Saudi Arabia, and they had to go, hey, do not take any kind of payment for your oil unless it's in dollars. And you're going to do this because we're going to protect you, and we're going to give you an ass load of treasuries. We're going to give you a sweet deal. Nobody's ever going to be able to fuck with you. And honestly, when it comes to the US dollar and how the US dollar got to that point, you would have, and how banking played a role in it, you'd have to go all the way back to the Civil War because money has a history. And you'd have to go all the way back to the British pound. They'd have to go back to the Dutch. They'd have to talk about how the Greeks were debased by their government. And this is where it gets interesting for me, Nick. In all of these money histories, they talk about it from like a nation state perspective. They track it based off nation state. When in my opinion, the money's not changing hands. It's the same families and the same banks, except for that's not public information. So it's hard to know it, so to speak. But just like take this, for example, for what it's worth. The United States declared its independence in 1776. We became a country in 1791. Although and we had what was the first national bank created, quite literally, like George Washington becomes president, first national bank gets legislated in. So we had a national bank, very beginning. And a lot of people were going to say, well, that's because there were different currencies and the Bill of Rights wasn't enough and yada, yada, yada. And this might be true. It's hard for a state that has 50 different jurisdictions to not have one money, one currency that's floating around. So maybe that's the reason they go for the first national bank. Now, in 1812, the Britons come back and they're pretty much going to kick our ass. There was a lot of shit that happened there where they got a lot of the tobacco business. They were allowed to start financing a lot of stuff. Basically, we didn't get away from our biggest bank, which was Great Britain, which was the banks of Great Britain. Anyway, fast forward to 1833, Andrew Jackson, the guy who beat him in 1812, becomes president. And he was actually on the side of Thomas Jefferson of no central bank. So he abolishes all central banks. Done. Not a thing anymore. Not happening. And that is how the world went, even through the gold rush in 1848. Gold rush was actually in a free banking era. It just was. There were crashes during the free banking era. I mean, like, to not have a national currency and talk about banking just sucks, guys. Banking doesn't make any sense. So banks collapse whether there's a money that backs it or doesn't back it. I'm just telling you, banks aren't safe. What's safe is the hegemony that a government might have on the currency to keep the banks safe. It's how they work in here. But anyway, Andrew Jackson abolishes it. And then in 1861, the Civil War starts, and Abraham Lincoln in 1863 establishes the first national currency since Andrew Jackson got rid of that shit. And Abraham Lincoln was able to do it because we were at war with the other half of the country. But what people don't talk about in the Civil War is that the South was almost entirely financed by J.P. Morgan and European banks. There was a collapse in Europe at that time, which basically caused them to have to sell all of their assets over here in the States, which is how the 3/5 law ever happened, which is what decided that black people were going to be property, which was wrong then as wrong now. I'm sure they knew it was wrong then, but they didn't have any money. So somebody needed money, and so they made people money. And then it wasn't actually that long after that we went to war. And you can argue, oh, we went to war for slavery. No, it was all economic. The North is like, fuck that. That's the stupidest shit ever. What are you talking about? You can't just have free labor and this and that and still not be able to produce a better product. And we have to give money back to these banks. So whatever is going on during that time, Abraham Lincoln starts another national currency because he's selling bonds to pay for a war. We win the Civil War. goes on for a long time. Everything's kind of smooth cooking. But then the telephone gets invented. Then the commercial light bulb comes in and just fucks every industry you can imagine up. I mean, it just everything that they were making. Yep, it's like what AI is going to do to ours. It's like, yeah, all of you guys get the fuck out of here. We don't need you. We don't need you. So there was a banking collapse in 1907, which is what caused or what drove us to have our first national bank again in 50 years, 60 years. We had a national currency, and the government did have money, or they did have the ability to issue bonds because of the Civil War, but there wasn't technically a central bank at that time. In 1913, the Fed gets created, and the Fed is created out of a false perception that we need a national bank because of these collapses that are happening due to the beautiful technologies being built. No, study money. Technology causes recessions because we create these huge industries around dinosaurs. That's what people do. And technology comes and displaces it. It'll happen in Bitcoin too. There will be recessions in Bitcoin for people because we're wrong in what direction we go as a people. Ultimately, if we're wrong and if we're all going towards the steamboat and then somebody's got an electric and everybody likes the electric one better, even though all of them have jobs with the steamboat, the electric one's going to win because that's what people want. So people will eventually start working towards that, moving towards that technology. You get my gist. So 1913, Fed gets installed. Wasn't long after that, the 20s are there. Then they see gold in 1931. Do we need to keep going? Then there's World War I. Then they need to move all the gold all over the world over here to the States to hide it from the Nazis or to hide it from, not at that time. It wasn't was it the 40s? Was that the Nazis?
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been the Nazis for World War I.
Yeah.
World War II.
The
World
40s
War I was what year to what year? Because World War II was the 40s. World War II was the 40s. So they have to move all the gold over. Causes somewhat of an issue. Weimar Germany happens 1971.
World War I was the early teens, like 1914,
right.
15.
But I guess my point of this rant, I wasn't really trying to connect, I guess, all of the world's problems to banking right here, even though you probably could. I'm trying to say that this economic report is ass. I mean, because we have, as a country, we can't just go, we weren't here and, we didn't have a declaration. We did. As a country, we did. That's what we're all going under. So we can't now just go, we're not doing that shit anymore. No, we are. We're still doing it whether you like it or not because there's a monetary history there. You can't just reverse pivot, then expect people's lives to get better because people's lives being great are a representation of the money they hold. And if the money's no good, there's going to be less people with good lives. And it's only going to be a matter of time before the chaos comes, which is, I kind of think that's what we're seeing. But anyway, that report is full of shit because they also don't mention all the other times governments did the same exact thing that our government's done now, which is find an excuse to debase the money to keep the politicians rich, keep the money with the bankers because they're the ones who are going to buy all the assets first, just like Silvergate Bank. $200 million of loans issued when they know they're collapsing. Who do you think they're giving this fucking easy money to? Their boys, their friends, their people, the people close to them. Who do you think the Fed's going to help out before they go under? The people who actually have the money, the people who are going to, that it doesn't matter if America collapses. They still have money. And there will be another one and another one and another one. There will be another Warren Buffett. There will be another Berkshire Hathaway in the new world. What the money is an entirely separate thing. And what people choose as money over the next turning or generation, what do you want? Nobody can really going to be in. There's not one point in history where any government has ever had the ability to go, yep, so we've been fucking you for 100 years. We're going to fuck you for 600 more with the same system. They can't do it. People aren't going to do that. They have to at least lie. So.
Hey, if you guys are not watching us right now, we do have video on Spotify and on YouTube. Go check out the YouTube channel. Seems like you guys are liking the YouTube channel, maybe a little bit more than the audio. So go see us on YouTube. Come follow us on Twitter as well. It is at Nick and Griff Show on Twitter. That's also everywhere else that you could find us on all the major podcast platforms, all that stuff. Also, if you are interested in some Satoshi Saturdays gear, just like the shirt that I've got on here matches this logo that's right above me, go check out the Satoshi shop. It's down in the description. We got some shirts and some long sleeves, some hoodies. Go check those out. Griff, it's always fun to hop on a Saturday and chat. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.